Reddit. What was your "oh shit, this person is a psychopath" moment when meeting people? I've been a public school teacher for a decade. I've only ever been scared of one student. First of all, this was in my first few years of teaching. This student was of myth in my school. I taught at an alternative school for students that had been expelled from every other school. But overall, my students were chill. They weren't good students, but if you met them at their level, things were usually fine. The exception was JT. JT was a sophomore when I met him, but at that point, I didn't teach him, but boy, did I hear about him. Somehow, his mom was able to game the paperwork and education system enough that this kid was unpunishable. Everything was technically covered under a litany of 504 plans and IEP paperwork, so much so that this kid literally pushed a 8-month pregnant teacher down and he was back 2 weeks later. He could literally punch a kid in the mouth and be back 2 days later. And because of this, he was just a massive problem. The first terrifying discovery for me was that his mom was very vocal about not wanting him home because she was scared of him. She had a good reason to be. JT, as a small child, tried to murder his family by lighting their house on fire, specifically trying to murder his brother by duct taping him to his bed while he slept. His brother survived but had horrific burns, but somehow, that didn't stop him from supporting his almost murderous brother. JT was ruthless, but he was also about 5'4", and his Krugered brother was about 6 foot and much physically stronger. I finally had the pleasure of teaching JT in his senior year. He had approximately 10 credits, all gym-based, and was nowhere near graduation. My first note was that this is the only kid I've ever met that just had nothing going on behind his eyes. He was shark-like. He never smiled or laughed unless someone got hurt. Cruel for cruelty's sake. One day, JT wasn't there, which, frankly, was odd. He had a great drug business going at school, and he only had to avoid one cop. The next day, we found out why he wasn't there. JT murdered a kid, shot him in the face for $12 and a little bit of weed. His lawyer tried to get his sentence lowered by arguing that it was technically his first offense since everything else happened when he was a kid. He got 25 to life. I am a kindergarten teacher and have been for years. I have had the one kid, nothing behind the eyes, truly takes pleasure in seeing people hurt. He was like a cancer in this classroom. He loved nothing more than to create scenarios in which he could witness other kids having their feeling hurt. Several times a week, he'd have a student crying in hysterics. He loved getting children to turn on each other. He'd lie to one kid about something another kid did, and he loved to see kids left out and feel sad and alone. It's like he literally fed off their anxiety. His parents were also super bizarre. They adopted like 6 kids of various genders and races, but all the kids were the same age. Then the mom would make reference to them being twins when they very obviously were not. I told my teacher partner that if I had to guess one child in my history of teaching that would end up on TV for a violent crime, it would definitely be this child. I forgot to mention that at our class Christmas party, he threw a full cup of scalding hot cocoa at my teaching partner's chest. It splattered and burned the surrounding children and gave my teaching partner a very bad burn. When I asked him what he was thinking, he said, "I was done with it. I hope he doesn't end up murdering someone someday," but I could totally see it. No emotion, no empathy, no conscience. Went on a date once and she casually dropped how she killed her brother's hamster with perfume as a kid BC. She was mad at him like it was just a quirky Lil story to laugh about. Needless to say, I started looking for an exit strategy at that point. When he just casually mentioned putting a cat in a cage and then putting the cage in water so he could watch it drown like it was no big deal and like it was something everyone has done at least once. I met the new boyfriend of an acquaintance, and within 10 minutes of the conversation, he was referring to women as holes. It was amazing how I suddenly remembered that my husband had requested I come help him with something. It was an Uber driver. My wife and I took an Uber down to the bars one weekend. Once he picked us up, I could easily tell he was on something. While we were crossing a bridge on the interstate, about halfway to our destination, he says, "Isn't it crazy that I could swerve off the road and kill us all right now?" I told him to get off on the next exit and canceled the ride. I also reported him to Uber, so hopefully nobody has to get in a car with that lunatic again. A kid I went to primary school with invited me to his house after school one day. Not many people talked to him because it was a private school, and he was only a student there because his dad was a groundskeeper. I didn't want to go, but didn't want to be a dick like everyone else, so I said yes, but I couldn't stay long. We went behind his house, and there were several bare spots in the grass. Some of them a single stick sticking up in the middle, while others had a thin plastic tube poking out. He was very excited as he started digging up one of the spots with a hose poking out. He pulled up a jar with a dead baby bird in it. The hose was poked through a hole in the lid to let air in. He went on to tell me he likes burying things alive. Sometimes he seals the jar tight, sometimes gives an air hose, and even puts a little food and water in to keep them alive longer. He said you can't bury them too deep, or you can't hear them trying to escape. Occasionally, he would pour water down the tubes to drown the animal. I was 8 to 10 years old at that time. I'm 52 now, and it still makes me sick to think about that. Was walking my dog down a main road, on lead. A lady was walking her dog off lead. Her dog stopped in the road, causing cars to stop. She had no control of it. Her dog lunged for my dog. I asked her to put her dog on a lead. She said she will stamp on my dog's head and let her dog kill mine. I knew it wasn't even worth arguing with crazy, so I carried on my walk. She then set her house on fire 2 weeks later with her children inside. Luckily, they were okay, but yeah, madness edit. Edit cause I can't respond to every comment lol. Yes, I made a statement. Yes, she's currently in prison. Was released after the arson, then rearrested for further crimes. Her children are aged 4 to 7, and the dog is also okay cut. After moving to a new city a few years ago, my best friend came to visit. We're both 30-something dudes. We were out at a bar when a guy asked to sit with us because there weren't any free tables outside. Fine. Being polite, we start talking to the guy. He told us he was a truck driver just stopping overnight in town, and at some point mentioned he was ex-military. From there, things began to get strange, but slowly, like the proverbial frog in water being brought to a boil. Not only was he in the military, but he had a brother. It might have been a twin, I can't recall, who was in the CIA, embedded in Russia. My friend and I also gradually got the sense that this guy was a little too interested in us. We eventually closed our tabs and decided to go to a different bar, but the guy stuck with us, telling increasingly tall tales about his time in the military. He eventually confessed that there was no brother. He was the spy who'd been embedded in Russia. What struck me was how, even though his stories got more and more ridiculous, his demeanor was deadly serious, if a bit overwrought. And the intensity was starting to make my skin crawl. Not only that, but he was starting to pick fights with other people at the bar, deliberately being belligerent. Over time, he started to radiate this menacing air that hadn't been apparent when we first started talking to him. He didn't get angry directly at us, but it was like he was demonstrating how scary he could be, and suggesting we stay on his good side. Finally, he took me aside and slipped into a not very convincing Russian accent. Alas, he was never a spy for the U.S. He was a double agent, a one-man Russian sleeper cell. But he couldn't bear lying to me. He had to come clean. Even though we had open tabs at the bar, my friend and I waited until the guy went to the bathroom, abandoned our cards, and dipped, post-haste. Cut. At a party in high school or just after it, we were doing late-night juvenile things like Truth or Dare. I knew most people there pretty well except the new boyfriend of my friend's sister. I'm not entirely certain how it came up, but he admitted to the entire group that he had sexually assaulted a dog. We were drunk and high, but everyone sobered up with that. We were too young to know what to do with that information, but we all just shut up and quickly left the party. She broke up with him not long after. I can't imagine doing something that awful to a helpless animal, but admitting it to a group of strangers seemed downright sociopathic. I was glad to never see his face again.